So Lord's Day 34 picks up where Lord's Day 33 left off, and specifically with regard to its definition of that which we do, which is actually good. And part of that definition is that it conforms to God's law. And so Lord's Day 34 picks up on that and says, what does the Lord say in his law? And then it runs through the Ten Commandments. We won't read those all. I mean, you certainly can and read them on your own and reflect on them. But it moves on then in question 93 to ask, how are these commandments divided? And it answers into two tables. The first has 4 commandments, teaching us what our relation to God should be. The second has 6 commandments, teaching us what we owe our neighbor. Then question 94 asks, what does the Lord require in the first commandment? And the answer is that I, not wanting to endanger my very salvation, avoid and shun all idolatry, magic, superstitious rites, and prayer to saints or to other creatures. That I sincerely acknowledge the only true God, trust him alone, look to him for every good thing, humbly and patiently love him, fear him, and honor him with all my heart. In short, that I give up anything rather than go against his will in any way. And then question 95, what is idolatry? And the answer is idolatry is having or inventing something in which one trusts in place of or alongside the only true God who has revealed himself in his word. All right, there's an awful lot here in Lord's Day 34, but we will do our best to keep it to 3 quick things. So the first of them is the reiteration or explanation that God's law comes in the form of 2 tables. So the first 4 commandments deal with our relationship with God, and the second set, the last 6, deal with our relationship with others or what we owe our neighbor. And we, of course, did a series through the 10 Commandments not so very long ago and talked about those things. But one of the things that's helpful about that division is that in some sense, largely so, you could see that division as what we refer to in the United States through our history as the separation of church and state in some sense. Because the first table is dealing with our relationship to God, and the second table is dealing with our relationship to mainly to others and articulates what is just conduct among men, which is the sphere that the state oversees. Although all of the truths here in terms of what that just conduct should look like obviously come from God. But it's another way of looking at the 2 tables, and I think it's very helpful as we try to think about our role in the world as God's people. The second quick thing is it probably is sort of stunning in question 94 that the answer should begin this way, that I, not wanting to endanger my very salvation, avoid and shun all idolatry, etc. And the reason it's probably shocking is because we as Reformed Christians, of course, believe in election and that God has chosen those who he will redeem, and that once he has drawn us to himself, we will certainly persevere. Why then does the Catechism talk about endangering our salvation when, in another sense, we say that our salvation can never be in danger because it's all a work of God? Well, because our perseverance is dynamic. In other words, one of the ways that God holds us to himself, well, the way God holds us to himself is through the gospel. And the first message of the gospel is always the danger of sin and not falling away into sin. And when we do, repenting of that sin, coming back to the cross, and then seeking to live more fully for him in the future. So that warning is very real. And those who aren't genuinely redeemed will not heed that warning, and even though they profess to be Christians, they will embrace sin and fall away. But those who genuinely are Christians will hear that warning, and the Spirit will cause that warning to give them holy fear of departing from God, and so drive them back to Him in a sense of need and to some degree desperation, that He would help us to stay near Him from day to day as we walk through life. All right, that's the second quick thing. The third quick thing here is the definite, or the way that the Catechism, in some sense, defines worship. In question 95, when it asks, what is idolatry? And it says, having or inventing something in which one trusts in place of or alongside the only true God. And that idea of trust, I think, is a helpful way of thinking about worship. So it's not just like kneeling down and praying or those kinds of things, but anything that we trust in, even alongside God, is an act of idolatry. And certainly those things cause us deep thought with regard to things in life that we may trust in some sense, alongside God. And so we need to think deeply about that. And we're going to need to think deeply about all these commandments. One of the other interesting things about this is, it's often said that, only a tiny little bit of the Catechism deals with our misery. And then it goes on to our deliverance and our thanksgiving. Yeah. However, even now, as we're getting into the section on gratitude, we're almost immediately going back to the law and talking about not wanting to endanger our very salvation. So we're never leaving behind that first message of the gospel of the danger of sin. It continues to work throughout the Catechism and obviously throughout our lives, and then the other two aspects of the gospel as well. But this call to seriousness, this call to reflection and confession and renewal, that call is continual. And so too is our preaching of these truths, that we don't leave that aspect behind, but continue to live within those 3 points of the gospel. And the 3 points, as we saw, that were articulated in question and answer 2 and in other Lord's Days since then. All right, those are 3 quick things from Lord's Day 34.